Welcome back to Fulcrum Intel Digest. This is Season 1, Episode 21. Today, we are undertaking a really critical analysis of a seismic shift that's happening right at the foundation of the Southern African economy. And we're going to be focusing specifically on the tectonic plates moving right under the nation of Botswana.
This is a really timely one. We've compiled a dense stack of recent expert analysis, corporate reports, and geopolitical research. And all of it is examining what is, truly an unprecedented disruption in the global diamond market.
Yeah.
Our mission here is sharp. We need to extract the core insights for you about how this rapid technological change, coupled with these monumental corporate strategy decisions, are reshaping the economic future of entire nations.
And the stakes couldn't be higher for you to understand this. For over a century, African diamonds weren't just valuable commodities. They were synonymous with wealth, with, remarkable political stability in places like Botswana, and of course, that incredibly successful marketing idea of a diamond is forever. Now, we are looking at a definitive turning point where that entire model is being fundamentally questioned. We need to understand why one of the world's biggest mining conglomerates, Anglo American, is just walking away from its cornerstone diamond holding, De Beers. And what that signals for a nation like Botswana, where diamonds are, quite literally the economic bedrock.
Yeah, the bedrock is the right word. We are working primarily from analysis surrounding Anglo American's public decision in 2024 to initiate a withdrawal, a divestment, or maybe a spinoff of its majority stake in De Beers. And we're tracing the ripple effects, the impact on key nations in the region, like Namibia, Angola, and Lesotho.
It's not just a simple sale, is it?
No, not at all. What's so fascinating here is that this isn't just a change in ownership. It's a full-blown high-velocity collision, the collision of exponential technology, of rapidly evolving consumer ethics, and these long-standing, often rigid political economy models that have defined resource wealth in Southern Africa for decades.
That collision metaphor is perfect. Before we jump into the mechanics of that collision, if you value this kind of focused, deep analysis, the kind that truly saves you hours of research, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Fulcrum Intel Digest so you don't miss any future analyses.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the history that made all this possible.
We do.
Because you really can't talk about the diamond industry without talking about the colossal power that De Beers wielded for generations. Since 1888, they maintained a virtual stranglehold, a literal monopoly. The key question is, how did they manage to do that for so long?
They did it through meticulous management of supply, a system often described by economic historians as a cartel-like system. This mechanism, which was centered around the infamous Central Selling Organization, or CSO, it was incredibly effective. It allowed De Beers to strictly control, or you could say hoard, the supply of rough diamonds entering the market.
From everywhere. From nearly all major producers globally. We're talking Russia, Australia, at various times. By carefully managing that flow-releasing diamonds only when demand was strong, they could keep prices artificially high. And that ensured their dominance for, over a century. It created this immense, predictable wealth.
And that predictable wealth led to a very successful and often cited development model right there in Africa. You're talking about the relationship with Botswana, correct?
Exactly. The joint venture known as Botswana, it's owned 50-50, an equal partnership between De Beers and the government of Botswana. And has historically been seen as the absolute diamond standard, if you will, for resource management. It was the model for how an extractive resource could be managed responsibly to actually benefit the host nation.
And for Botswana, that meant stability.
Stability, a massive source of foreign exchange reserves, and critically, it helped fund the institutional growth that built the modern Botswana we know today. It was, for a very long time, a symbiotic relationship built on mutual profit.
But that stability, which I think a lot of people assumed was permanent, is now severely challenged. The pivotal announcement came in 2024. Anglo American, holding the controlling 85% stake in De Beers, announced its decision to divest. This wasn't just a tremor, it was an earthquake.
It was. And when a conglomerate of Anglo American size, a true behemoth in global mining, chooses to abandon a brand as significant as De Beers, you have to look beyond just the quarterly results. You have to focus on the long-term structural drivers. And analysts believe this dramatic move was propelled by really a combination of pressures.
Okay, let's break those down. Let's start with the internal pressure, the corporate strategy.
Right. So Anglo American is facing immense pressure from activist investors, and they're undertaking this massive strategic pivot. Their focus is shifting aggressively toward what they're calling future-ready minerals.
Which means
Copper, iron ore, platinum group metals, the things that are absolutely essential for the global energy transition and, electrification. De Beers, by contrast, is sort of this legacy consumer-facing business. It requires huge branding investment and carries this inherent volatility that their shareholders just increasingly disliked.
so it just didn't fit anymore.
It didn't fit. The sources we've seen indicate that De Beers' contribution to Anglo's core profits had been steadily declining. It was just less and less crucial to their overall balance sheet. The complexity of luxury retail just didn't mesh with their streamlined industrial strategy.
So they were already looking for a reason to shed the asset, and that external reason, the second factor, it provided the perfect exit ramp, the undeniable surging competition from lab-grown diamonds.
Precisely. They saw the writing on the wall. The margin, low competition era of natural diamonds was over. Their financial models were clearly showing that the decreasing profit margins weren't just a cyclical dip. They were structural, permanent declines driven by technology. And when you have a massive capital-intensive operation like De Beers, that kind of structural decline makes the asset, well, it makes it disposable.
And for Botswana, what makes this decision so painful is the sheer scope of De Beers' role. They weren't just partners in, digging holes in the ground.
That is such a critical distinction. It's so easy to overlook. De Beers controlled the entire value chain for Botswana's diamonds. They provided the expertise that a newly independent African state couldn't possibly replicate back in the day. So not just the massive mining operations, but the global marketing, the branding, the very engine that created the idea of a diamond as a necessary luxury.
The Odd Diamond is Forever campaign.
That was them. And they also managed the downstream integration through things like the Diamond Trading Company. With Anglo's exit, that century-old network of expertise, of capital and control, that entire system that Botswana's stability was built on, is now facing this profound, urgent moment of uncertainty. Who will buy it? Who will manage the global marketing needed to compete against this LGD wave? That uncertainty is deeply destabilizing.
Okay, so that sets the stage perfectly. Let's dive into that technological disruption, the thing that is, as you said, eating away at the core business.
Yes, the lab-grown diamonds, or LGDs. And to really understand the speed of this crisis, we have to look at the numbers. This isn't a slow burn. It's an instantaneous industrial transformation.
The numbers detailing this are genuinely alarming for the established sector. They tell the whole story. Back in 2015, the LGD market share was, barely a blip? Just 1% of the overall diamond market? How quickly did that change?
It was exponential. By 2023, just 8 years later, the market share for LGDs had exploded to over 15% globally. And the projections suggest they could command 25% or more of the market by the end of this decade. That explosive nonlinear growth is the biggest red flag imaginable for the mined diamond sector. It shows the barriers to entry have just been obliterated.
So the manufacturing process is just scaling at speeds that traditional mining can't possibly match.
It can't. Geology works in millennia. Factories work on quarterly production cycles.
Okay, let's make sure we're clear for our listeners. Let's talk about the tech itself. Are LGDs fake diamonds, as the natural diamond industry sometimes implies in its marketing?
Absolutely not. And that's the source of the industry's deepest dilemma. LGDs are chemically, physically, and optically identical to mined diamonds. They are genuine carbon crystal structures. The only difference is their origin. They're grown in a lab, not deep in the earth.
And there are two main ways of doing this, right?
Two primary techniques. The first is high pressure, high temperature, or HPHT. That's the older method. It uses these massive, complex presses to recreate the conditions deep underground. Immense pressure, temperatures around 1500 degrees Celsius. Take a tiny diamond seed, dissolve pure carbon-alike graphite around it, and under those conditions, the carbon crystallizes onto the seed. It grows a diamond.
And the second method?
The second, and increasingly popular method, is chemical vapor deposition, or CVD. This one is often seen as more scalable. You place a diamond seed in a vacuum chamber, introduce carbon-containing gases like methane, then you superheat those gases into a plasma with microwaves. The carbon atoms basically rain down and build the diamond layer by layer.
So both methods produce gem-quality stones in weeks, not eons.
Exactly. And that speed, that manufacturing efficiency, translates directly into the market killer, the cost advantage.
Which fundamentally challenges the entire business model of natural diamonds.
It does. That model is built on perceived rarity and the immense cost of deep earth extraction, processing, security, logistics. Mining is incredibly capital intensive. LGD production is factory-based. It's constantly being optimized. As the process improves, costs plummet. Our sources anticipate that by 2025, so very soon, LGDs will be 80 to 90% cheaper than their mined counterparts of comparable quality.
80 to 90%.
Yes. Think about the economic impact of that. A virtually identical product for maybe a tenth of the price at retail. That makes the traditional high-overhead mining operation fundamentally vulnerable.
But wait, De Beers has faced competition before, right? They managed to suppress the Russian diamond influx in the 70s, the Australian spike in the 80s using the CSO. What makes this so different from those historical supply shocks?
That is a great question, and it gets right to the heart of the crisis. The previous challenges, Russia, Australia, they were still supply challenges. They were about other mines. De Beers could use its cartel mechanism, the CSO, to just buy up the excess supplies, stockpile it, and maintain price floors.
They were fighting other miners, but everyone was playing the same game based on finite geologic supply.
But this is different.
This time, they're fighting an infinite manufacturing capacity, a capacity that obeys the laws of Moore's law and process optimization, not geology. De Beers cannot buy up all the production from a global network of high-tech factories. And the efficiency gains mean the price floor is constantly dropping, so stockpiling doesn't even work. It's a war against technology, not a competitor's mine.
And here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. It's moving beyond just price and technology. This is about a deep cultural and ethical shift in consumer values. That long-standing belief that African diamonds are forever is being actively supplanted.
Precisely. And the shift is most pronounced among younger consumers, millennials, and especially Gen Z. These are the people now entering their prime purchasing years for engagement rings, for jewelry. And surveys are showing that a significant majority, around 60% of Gen Z consumers, actively prioritize stones that are ethically sourced, sustainable, and transparently manufactured.
And the natural diamond industry has had issues there, historically.
For many years, yes. Despite the real efforts of organizations like Botswana, the industry as a whole faced reputational challenges, blood diamonds, conflict financing, the overall environmental impact of deep mining. These things linger in the public consciousness.
And the LGD producers have just masterfully capitalized on this, haven't they? They've turned the weakness of the mine sector into their core strength.
They've executed a brilliant counter-marketing strategy. They market their products as transparently environmentally friendly and definitively conflict-free. Because they're made in a lab, the supply chain is auditable from start to finish. They can give you a certificate detailing the energy used, the lack of human rights concerns. It allows them to completely bypass the historical baggage of the mine sector.
So the branding battle is now fully underway.
It is. De Beers spent a century linking natural diamonds to eternal love and tradition through sheer marketing force. LGDs are being promoted as future-proof, sustainable, accessible. The inherent value is shifting in the consumer's mind. It's moving away from geological rarity toward assured ethics and supply transparency. And the fact that the tech allows these new brands to claim a smaller carbon footprint is a massive factor, especially for luxury consumers. This dual assault technology and shifting ethics is what made De Beers disposable to Anglo-American.
Okay, so that brings us to the impact on the ground. This disruption doesn't just impact a balance sheet. It lands with the force of a national crisis in Botswana. And it's because of the nation's profound, unique economic structure.
We have to quantify this dependency because it's not just high, it's overwhelming. Diamonds are the absolute mainstay, accounting for a staggering 80 to 90% of Botswana's total export earnings.
80 to 90%. And what about their GDP?
Diamonds account for about 1/3 of the nation's entire gross domestic product. It's an exceptional concentration of economic activity. And as we said, this was a double-edged sword. For decades, it meant stability, high per capita income, reliable foreign exchange. But it also solidified what scholars call a structural reliance on a single product, a product that is globally traded, finite, and now, as we see, technologically vulnerable.
So when the global market for that one product suddenly contracts by, say, 15% because of LGDs, the vulnerability of that entire model is just exposed instantly.
Instantly. And the direct implications for the average citizen are severe. This isn't abstract economic theory. The predictable, massive revenues from Botswana have historically underpinned Botswana's genuinely impressive welfare model. We are talking about critical public services.
Like what, specifically?
We're talking funding for universal education programs, expansive national healthcare systems, infrastructure like roads and power grids, and significant public employment programs that absorb a huge percentage of the working population. As diamond revenues fall, the threat to this essential public spending, to the very social contract between the government and its people, becomes very real.
So Botswana was this gold standard for resource management.
Okay.
The mechanism was the 50-50 revenue sharing. It was how the government used the money, right?
Oh, exactly. Unlike many resource-rich nations where the wealth is lost to corruption or conflict, Botswana channeled this revenue directly into national savings and infrastructure. Diamond revenues literally built the modern capital, Gaborone. They funded decades of free primary and secondary education. That dramatically boosted the country's literacy rate, its human capital index. It helped Botswana become the successful, stable democracy it is today. So losing that revenue stream means reversing decades of social progress is a very real possibility.
Which sounds like a recipe for social and political instability. What happens to the job market if this price decline accelerates?
Well, the immediate labor concerns are deeply alarming. Mining operations are high-skill, high-wage jobs. If Botswana is forced to reduce production, which seems inevitable, and they lay off workers, it will just exacerbate youth unemployment, which is already worryingly high, currently over 25% nationally. These are young people with expectations of being absorbed into a functional economy. If the diamond sector can't do that anymore, that youth bulge becomes a ticking social and political time bomb.
And the kind of financial strain. The threat to the social contract, the high youth unemployment, that can quickly ripple up and challenge Botswana's reputation for political stability.
Absolutely. When resources become scarce, political dynamics change. It can intensify competition among the governing elite for control over what's left of the resource revenues. And that raises the risk of increased elite capture and rent-seeking behavior. Instead of focusing on wealth creation through diversification, people start competing to extract wealth from a shrinking pie. And that shift is profoundly corrosive to democracy.
This connects directly to a broader theory in development economics, doesn't it? The political Dutch disease. Let's break that down.
It's a critical concept here. The standard economic Dutch disease is when a boom in one export, like diamonds, drives up the local currency. And that makes all your other exports, like manufacturing or tourism, uncompetitive.
Okay.
The political Dutch disease is often more damaging. It argues that a heavy reliance on massive, easy-to-collect resource rents. It diminishes the political and institutional incentives to do the hard, long-term policy work.
So why bother building a complex private banking sector or diversifying into tech?
Exactly. Why bother building that complex, diversified, knowledge-based economy when a predictable, massive flow of cash from the ground can keep you afloat and maintain political peace? The political elite avoids the hard work of building robust institutions and nurturing a competitive private sector. So Botswana has enjoyed decades of stability, but maybe at the cost of not aggressively diversifying during the good years. Now that the rents are drying up, they're left without the institutional muscle or private sector diversity to replace that income quickly. The clock is ticking very, very loudly.
And as crucial as Botswana is to this story, we have to broaden the lens. This is not just a Botswana problem. The fallout affects the entire regional bloc, the Southern African Development Community, or SADC.
That's right. Southern Africa operates as an interconnected system, especially when it comes to mineral wealth. Several other SADC economies are heavily reliant on diamonds, creating this collective vulnerability. You've got Namibia with Namdeb, another major De Beers joint venture. You have Angola, home to the massive Katoka mine, and Lesotho with its high-value Lechekeng mine.
And the fiscal reliance in these neighboring states, it mirrors Botswana's fundamental risk.
Right. In some cases, it's even more precarious because their governance models are less robust. According to regional economic analysis, mineral rents, which includes diamonds, oil, other things, they constitute over 40% of government revenues in both Angola and Namibia.
Over 40%.
Yes. For Namibia, the Namdeb partnership is crucial. It funds huge parts of their coastal infrastructure and social programs. For Angola, diamonds provide much-needed foreign currency to complement their oil revenues. So this intense reliance makes them all extremely susceptible to the kind of price drops we're projecting for natural diamonds. It translates directly into destabilized national budgets, potential debt crises, and reduced capacity for social spending across the whole region.
So the drop in natural diamond prices undermines more than just individual nations. It undermines the SADC's overall mineral export base and therefore the collective capacity for regional investment.
Precisely. This erosion of fiscal resources directly jeopardizes critical regional integration initiatives. And these initiatives are paramount for the SADC's future. They recognized years ago they needed to move from fragmented national markets to an integrated economic bloc. This is all formalized under the SADC Industrialization Strategy and Roadmap, which runs from 2015 to 2063. It's an ambitious strategy that relies heavily on funding from its resource-rich members.
And I imagine diamond revenue was supposed to be a key part of that funding.
It was. The strategy has three key pillars: industrial development, infrastructure support, and resource mobilization. Stable, high-value mineral income is crucial for Pillar 3 resource mobilization and for underwriting the massive capital needed for Pillar 2 infrastructure. The expectation was that nations like Botswana and Angola would be the fiscal anchors, providing long-term funding certainty. When that anchor starts to drift, the entire regional plan slows down.
Can you give us some specific, tangible examples of projects that are now under threat because of this?
Yeah, the most prominent ones are vital for regional connectivity and energy security. First, there's the Southern African Power Pool, or SAPP. The SAPP aims to ensure a stable supply of electricity across multiple states through interconnected grids and shared generation projects. It's meant to mitigate the chronic power shortages that plague the region. But these cross-border projects require immense long-term financial commitments, and those are much harder to secure when your core state revenues are suddenly volatile.
And the second example relates to logistics.
That would be the North-South Corridor. This is a massive transport initiative designed to facilitate trade and logistics from South Africa through Botswana, Zambia, all the way up to the DRC. It involves upgrading road, rail, and border infrastructure. Without the reliable funding that commodity income provides, the maintenance and expansion of this corridor stalls. For a small, landlocked country like Lesotho, the reliability of that corridor is, well, it's existential.
So all of these integrated projects rely on stable commodity income.
They do. And this raises an urgent question for the entire SADC leadership. How can regional stability and deep economic integration be maintained and funded without that stable commodity income stream to underwrite the costs? The crisis is forcing SADC to find a plan B much faster than anyone anticipated.
Okay, so given the urgency of this dual crisis, what are the policy prescriptions? What are the strategic options being discussed for Botswana and the wider SADC bloc? This has to be about action now.
The overwhelming consensus among economists and policy analysts mandates one immediate action for Botswana. They must drastically hasten economic diversification. They have to get away from the extractive industries. The shift has to be targeted, moving capital and human resources into high-value, knowledge-based sectors.
So which sectors are being named as the most viable replacements for that massive diamond income?
The recommendations fall into three key areas where Botswana has a comparative advantage. First is finance and business services. Given Botswana's robust legal system, low corruption, they could position Gaborone as a regional financial hub. Second, logistics and transportation, leveraging their central geographic location within SADC.
And the third area, which seems to align with global trends.
Renewable energy. Botswana has exceptional solar energy potential. The policy suggestion is to aggressively invest in large-scale solar farms. They could potentially become a net exporter of clean energy to the SADC region through that SEPP network we just talked about. The goal isn't just to move capital, it's about using the remaining diamond revenues to support industrialization, foster entrepreneurship, and develop regional value chains in manufacturing and tourism.
But there must be critics of this. Some analysts argue that focusing on renewable energy or financial hubs is what's a classic green elephant project. Too costly, too slow, and it won't replace diamond revenue in time to prevent fiscal pain. What do the sources say about that?
That is the core policy challenge, the time frame. The critics are right that diversification takes, 15 to 20 years to really mature. Botswana doesn't have that luxury. The sources acknowledge the shift has to be front-loaded. This is where the idea of using a sovereign wealth fund built during the diamond boom to subsidize the early high-risk stages of new industries is crucial. They need special economic zones, tax incentives, a local venture capital environment to pull talent out of the mining orbit. The speed of implementation will determine whether this succeeds or if the Dutch disease lingers fatally.
Now let's address the LGD threat head-on. If technology is the existential problem, maybe it's also the solution. What if Botswana just embraced the future and beat the manufacturers at their own game?
That is the most intriguing and perhaps most disruptive strategic option being discussed. Embracing technological innovation by actively entering the lab-grown diamond market itself. It would be a massive counterintuitive pivot, but it could transform the narrative and the revenue base at the same time.
It does seem counterintuitive. Why would you compete against the very tech that's destroying your main industry? What advantage could Botswana possibly hold against established high-volume producers in China or India?
The advantage lies in two crucial areas that play directly into modern consumer demand and global ESG metrics: governance and clean energy. Botswana has a strong, globally recognized reputation for ethical governance and political stability. That's a key selling point in the luxury market. They have none of the political risk baggage of some other manufacturers. If they combine that reputation with an ability to use their massive, untapped clean energy potential, specifically solar, they could position themselves as a credible producer of green synthetic diamonds.
So, Green Diamond Corridor.
Exactly. This concept aligns perfectly with prevailing global ESG, environmental, social governance trends. They could brand their LGDs as the only truly conflict-free, solar-powered, ethically governed diamonds in the world. That would be a massive marketing advantage, leveraging their established trust instead of just trying to compete on cost.
Okay, moving to the regional perspective. How can SADC coordinate a defense mechanism? Because for smaller members like Lesotho and Namibia, the margin for error is razor thin.
The analyses all stress the SADC has to urgently develop a joint coordinated strategy, relying on individual nations to weather this storm is simply not resilient enough for the bloc's overall stability.
What mechanisms are being proposed for that collective defense?
One key long-term proposal is the creation of a regional extractive stabilization fund. This would basically be a collective savings account. Member states would commit a percentage of their mineral revenues during the good times. Then when prices fall or a shock like this occurs, the fund could provide emergency fiscal support or loans to the hardest hit members. It promotes regional solidarity over national isolation.
And the second mechanism relates to value capture, joint beneficiation policies. What does that mean and why is it so crucial now?
Beneficiation is the in-country processing, the cutting and polishing of rough diamonds into retail-ready gems. It's vital because it dramatically increases the value captured by the host country. A rough diamond might sell for $100, but after beneficiation, the value added could take it to $1,000. Under a joint policy, SADC members could use the SADC mining protocol to create shared cutting and polishing facilities or regional diamond trading centers. This helps smaller economies like Lesotho and Namibia capture more of that downstream revenue.
And the timing is key.
It's key because if the price of the rough diamond is dropping because of LGDs, the only way to maintain revenue is to capture a greater share of the value-added activity. Beneficiation creates stable, skilled jobs and helps them better withstand the volatility hitting the rough stone market. It shifts wealth from the mines to the factories.
This transition is clearly a monumental, existential moment for Southern Africa. The window for adaptation feels incredibly narrow.
It truly is. The decline of De Beers' century-old dominance and the exponential rise of lab-grown diamonds represent, well, maybe the most significant structural shift in global extractive economies since the end of the Cold War. For Botswana and the entire SADC, the predictable diamond era is unequivocally ending. Prosperity now will necessitate rethinking resource dependency entirely and placing massive, urgent emphasis on investing in human capital and enhancing regional cooperation. They have to build that resilience before the revenue streams become structurally unreliable.
So let's quickly recap the core insights of this analysis for you, the listener. The simultaneous pressures Anglo-American withdrawing from De Beers, coupled with the exponential rise of LGDs from a 1% to a 15% market share in less than a decade, this signals a permanent turning point. We've seen how Botswana's structural reliance on diamonds, which funded its historic welfare state, is now its greatest vulnerability, raising the risks of political Dutch disease and instability.
And their future prosperity now depends entirely on rapid adaptation. That means massive economic diversification into areas like finance and renewable energy, and maybe a bold strategy to embrace technology and become a trusted producer of green lab-grown diamonds. And crucially, regional stability hinges on collective action, like that proposed SADC stabilization fund and joint beneficiation efforts.
The decline of the De Beers model is a textbook, real-time example of how swiftly technological disruption can dismantle even the most stable, long-standing economic models. This wasn't a collapse due to bad governance or war. This was driven purely by engineering ingenuity and shifting ethics. And that leaves us with the final provocative thought for you to consider. The core challenge for Botswana and the entire SADC bloc isn't whether their diamonds will physically run out, they won't for many years. It's whether they can successfully transition their wealth, their economic engine, from underground minerals to above-ground innovation and human capital before that revenue stream runs structurally dry. The speed and political will of that transition will define the next generation of Southern Africa.
We hope you found this deep exploration useful for gaining perspective on this critical global economic shift. Understanding this story is crucial to understanding the future of commodity dependency everywhere.
Absolutely. For more detailed analysis, deeper dives into policy implications, and related discussions on the SADC industrialization strategy, be sure to check out our blog and the rest of our YouTube channel. We'll see you in the next Fulcrum Intel Digest.